I'm gonna get you before you get me, pretty much, you know.
And just there seems to be an arrogance of power.
It is
that
very, very arrogant, and a sense of that they're invincible, that they have the right to just basically literally do whatever they want, and that's literally how they act. You know, you'll see a police officer, like I had said to you earlier, he'll be driving, and then in the middle of traffic, he'll just make a U-turn and doesn't even put on the sirens or nothing, or they'll be driving down the wrong way, and the cars are frantically trying to get out the way before they cause an accident, and they just have no remorse or they don't care about anything. And it's like, I will never forget the first time. Well, I've seen levels of, I would say, police brutality and levels of police harassment. You know, I've been a victim.
What was the difference?
To me, the difference between brutality and harassment basically is brutality is a cop beating on you, like he's physically touching you, physically harming you, and harassment doesn't necessarily have to be physical harm, but it could just be cursing at me or ridiculing me or belittling me or talking to me like you're greater than me or you're better than me because you have on a uniform, and that's not the truth, you know. And it's another thing, it's like, to me, you only see certain behavior in certain communities.
Are you implying that the blacker the neighborhood, the more police misconduct, the more police brutality?
Absolutely, because I remember if it was Sunday, I don't remember the date. What was it? The Sunday before.
Before last.
Yeah, before last. And I was going home, and there was this hall or whatever, and the cops, I don't know what incident happened inside of the hall, but what I witnessed was excessive behavior as far as physical abuse, because the police officers, they were literally pulling women out of the place. Mind you, it's like 20 steps. They have to put them down. They were dragging these men officers are dragging women down steps. Their clothes are tattered and torn. Their faces are bleeding. There's kids that's obviously traumatized. They're wheezing. They're holding their chest. They're crying, you know, for their mothers and fathers. And the police don't care. They don't realize that this child is never going to forget this day. They don't understand what's going on, you know. I don't know what happened, but I know that it couldn't have been, there was no threat to the officer. These women were not posing a threat. There was another guy that he wasn't under arrest. He was, I guess the officer just wanted to ask him a question, but the officer pulled him and he pulled away from the officer because he didn't want to be touched. And the officer just punched the guy in his face. And then about 15, 20 cops just jumped on him, started beating him up and everything. And I'm standing there, mind you, there's helicopters with lights, there's 1,000 pedestrians. The people are just standing there screaming at the cops, asking them, why are you doing this? Like, what's the reason? That he's no threat to you whatsoever, but you're beating on him with batons.
You can't ask the question because
then they look at you and that's exactly what they did. They told us to get off the corner and move, you know. And it's like, what can you do? Who can you report this to? Like, these are supposed to be the ones that are supposed to protect and serve you, but when they're violating you, who are you supposed to call on?
There's no real system for that.
Yeah.
The system that you could try to use will put you right back to that same place.
It's
just a feeling of real profound injustice and frustration when it happens to you, because whether it's a small thing, just someone talked to you appropriately, or it was actually an actual beating and you're out of the way, it's a frustration because you know it was not right, but you know you have no recourse in the situation.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of people, they're afraid to actually say anything and speak out because they feel like this government, you know, this government does have the power to do whatever they want, in a sense, but it's like, to report a complaint, to complain against a cop, if you call internal affairs, they're going to tell you to go to the precinct and write the precinct that you're reporting and write a report about that precinct. Now, I mean, how is that supposed to work?
It doesn't. I mean, you wind up going to
and it's the same person, and now you're a target. You know what I'm saying? So that's what people are thinking. And another incident that I seen was, I know I was coming out of my mother's building, and all I heard was, I guess the guy, he was fleeing on foot. He had allegedly hit, it was a hit and run, and he flew from the scene. He was running from the scene. And when they apprehended him, he was on foot. He didn't have a weapon or anything like that. But they told him, freeze, stop running, get on the ground. And when I looked, the police officer had his gun. He was an undercover cop. And the only reason I knew he was a cop because while he was screaming at the guy, he pulled out eventually. He didn't have it out. He finally pulled out his badge from underneath his shirt and had it hanging while he was pointing the gun and telling the guy, don't move. But to me, the excessive force was he had his foot in the guy's head, like right here on the head and the neck. Mind you, the guy doesn't have a weapon. He's not resisting arrest or anything like that. He's complying with the officer. He's laying on the floor, his hands are out, and he's pointing the gun at the guy's head and pressing his foot into his face on concrete. There's nowhere for his head to go. Pressing his head into the ground like, he's a dog. And then a guy that has nothing to do with it tried to cross the street, and he pointed the gun at the guy and told him, don't move. If you come over here, I'm going to shoot you. And I'm like, okay, well, he's just trying to cross the street. He lives on the block. Like, nobody knows what's going on. All we know is there's this guy standing in the middle of the street with a gun pointed at another person's head, telling him not to move, And
Hi, Derek Sacerdote again, running for City Council District 46. I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes on the issues of law enforcement and civil rights. No part of my speech has generated as much commentary as this section. People have given me lots of advice on what I could say and what I should not say. I'd rather simply go out on a limb and be direct. I believe relations between police and civilians are bad and have been bad for some time. The extent to which you agree with that statement probably depends on where in the city you live and what you look like. I'm not here to attack police officers. Most are responsible, most do their job properly. But when you carry a gun and a badge, every single mistake, even the slightest mistake, is a serious one. The city must own up to misconduct when it does occur. It must own up to the fact that the blacker the neighborhood, the higher the incidence of misconduct, of police brutality, and needless detainments. The city often pretends these problems simply don't exist. Tell that to Amadou Diallo. Tell that to Abner Louima. Tell that to Sean Bell, to Michael Mineo, and to Christopher Robinson. Tell that to everyone who has been cursed at, threatened, misled, pushed, shoved, humiliated by police, and had nowhere to turn. I can't believe how often I hear people tell me that they or a friend was stepped on the street by a police officer. It's outrageous. The damage cuts both ways. Why do we send rookies, new police officers, onto the most challenging streets in the entire city without sufficient training? It destroys the potential of these people to ever become effective, responsible officers. No, they may not be dead after the conflict, but their lives are ruined nevertheless. Cameras watch us in this city 24/7. I think it's only fair and appropriate under the circumstances that we turn the cameras on the police as well. In the cars, in the precincts, and yes, even in the jails. Your rights in the city unfortunately do not amount to much when you're handcuffed behind closed doors. To use the line police often use on us, if you're not doing anything wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. Protecting our freedom is the primary role of our government. It's hard to do that if you're constantly engaged in doing the opposite. Start with the First Amendment and work your way down. The city has mangled every single one of our constitutional rights. When I see protesters being dragged away or being sprayed with tear gas in their faces, it's sad when I realize this is happening in places like China and Iran. When I realize these things are happening in places like New York, I'm shocked, almost speechless. How do we have the arrogance to go around the world preaching people to their civil rights record when our civil rights record in this country is atrocious? If elected, I would make civil rights and the prevention of police misconduct a top priority.